We are Stroke Support Alliance. We are an entity which is creating a platform for people suffering from stroke, the stroke survivors, their caregivers, their families, the doctors, the rehabilitation experts, and bring them into one platform so that issues which are being faced by the stroke survivors and their families, their concerns regarding rehabilitation, their concerns regarding what kind of treatment they should undertake, where to seek professional services, what are the services available at the grassroots level, whom to go to, what kind of rehabilitation works for them, and how to take care of people who have already undergone stroke can be addressed. So this is a platform which is for people in order to raise awareness about stroke, provide support and technical information for people suffering from stroke, and bringing together all stroke survivors, their caregivers, and their families into a platform where so that their issues can be raised to the policymakers. So today we have a distinguished panel of experts in order to address your issues and concern. So not wasting any time, let me introduce Dr. Sudhir Kumar. Dr. Sudhir Kumar is the leading neurologist in southern India. He has been associated with CMC Vellore as an lecturer till 2004 on neurology. He has done his MBBS and MD in medicine as well as DM in neurology from CMC Vellore. And since 2004, he has been associated with Apollo Hyderabad and is a leading expert on stroke, neurocritical care, neuro pain management. He is an expert whose papers have been published in over 120 journals, and his passion is to make neurology simple and more comprehensible to the layman, and that's what he has been doing. So welcome on board, Dr. Sudhir Kumar. And our second expert today is Dr. Anuruddh Chirania. He is an rehabilitation expert. He is associated with APCOS, that is, which is a joint venture of Apollo and COS Italy. He is an expert in rehabilitation of stroke patients, in cardio rehabilitation, in pediatric rehabilitation, geriatric rehabilitation, and he is also passionate about patient education on various aspects. So, welcome aboard, Dr. Chirania. Welcome to this webinar on for Stroke Support Alliance, and the first to welcome you to give your presentation. Over to you, Dr. Sudhir Kumar. Thank you, Dr. Sudhir Kumar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Arindam Moitro, for nice introduction, and Stroke Alliance Group for arranging this talk show for the benefit of stroke survivors and their caregivers. And I'm happy to be a part of this. Is my voice audible clearly?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Sure. Okay. So, and then so today I'll be talking about this very important topic of the stroke, and we are going to talk some basic stuff about stroke, like how common it is, and how do we recognize stroke, what are the early treatments, and then the post-stroke care, which I'll touch briefly, and then my colleague Dr. Anirudh Chirania will talk more in terms of rehabilitation, a part which is very very important and useful. uh, so in this presentation I will be covering these topics: how common is stroke, what are the common symptoms of stroke, how is stroke diagnosed, what is the best treatment of stroke in early stages, what are the post-stroke complications, what are the risk factors of stroke, and how can we prevent stroke. So it looks a little complicated, but I'll go through it briefly, and I'll try to explain. And then of course, as Mr. Antham told, if any queries are there from the audience and the viewers, at the end of both the talks we can take them up. So first, what is stroke? So stroke basically, it is a common thing what we say, lakwa or paralysis, So it is a common condition, unfortunately, because something which is disabling, we don't want it to be common, and it is among the three leading causes of death and disability. So we all have heard about heart attacks and cancer. When somebody hears about heart attack or cancer, we get scared and fearful. But when we use the term stroke, it doesn't generate the same amount of fear, because it's like heart attack refers to heart, so it is more glamorized, and people are always concerned about the heart. But when it refers to brain, somehow it's not given the due importance. But it is a common condition among the top three leading causes of death and disability. Stroke is also one of them, and it is not uncommon. If you look at this prevalence, 1 out of 6 people. So if you have a hall of where 100 people are sitting, out of 100, almost we can say almost 1 in 6, so close to more than 14 or 15 people out of 100 will have stroke in their lifetime. If you look at people above 40, because stroke is common after 40 and especially in 60s, and as the person gets older, stroke is more common. So if you have a group where we have only 40 plus people, 25% of them, so 1 in 4 people above 40 will suffer stroke in their later lives. So it is basically, it's a common condition, and there is no denying. So we can't you know deny the fact that it is common. So we have to only look at how we can recognize it and how we can take the best treatment. So what are the common symptoms? The first step in recognizing any disease is we should know the symptoms, and once we know the symptoms, we can get alerted and seek necessary help from the doctors or the nearby medical facilities. So to remember the common symptom of stroke, just remember this acronym called FAST. We all want to be fast, we want everything fast. So FAST, in this each alphabet it stands for one symptom. So F stands for face. So when you have a person where the face looks little crooked suddenly, face goes to one side, and one side of the face is not moving, especially when if you ask them to close the eyes, they can close one side, other eye is not closing. When they try to eat food, from one side of the food, saliva or water or food starts drooling, then we know that it could be a stroke. And all these symptoms happen suddenly. Stroke doesn't give anybody any time. And then second alphabet is A, it stands for arm. So both the arms, there should be equal strength. So if the person is holding the arms like that and one arm is weak and it starts to drop down or drifts to a side, so if weakness of one arm is there, again it could mean stroke. S stands for speech. So speech, all of us talk, and so when somebody is not able to speak clearly, when the words are not clear, or they want to speak something but the words are not coming, the exact words they want to use, it's there in the head but they can't speak. And sometimes they are not able to understand. When you say something, you ask something but they answer something else. So either difficulty in understanding the spoken words, or not able to speak clearly, or having slurred speech. All this can be symptoms of stroke. They are the common symptoms. And T stands for time. Why we emphasize that? Many times we feel that okay, fine, मैं सो रहा था, लेटा रहा, इसलिए numbness आ गया, थोड़ा weakness आ गया, and people tend to wait for a few hours कि ठीक हो जाएगा. But we should not waste time. When something like this happens, we should always think that it is stroke. It is better to overestimate and overdiagnose, and then make sure there is no stroke, rather than waiting and watching and losing the golden hours where the best treatments can be given. So time is important, and rush to the nearest hospital where at least a CT scan facility is there, and where a neurologist could be there. And today, it's luckily in our country, it's not difficult to have hospitals which has CT scan and a neurologist, or even an MD physician should be able to diagnose and treat. So these are common symptoms. Some other symptoms to watch for will be, sudden severe headaches, blurring of vision, imbalance. Somebody walking as if they're drunk. So somebody who's drunk, of course, we can't make out in them. But those who don't drink and those who are not drunk, if they walk wobbly and lose balance, it could be a sign of stroke. And some strokes also cause difficulty in swallowing. So when they want to, swallow water or food, they are not able to swallow. So if you notice anyone having these symptoms, suspect stroke and go to the nearest emergency and get evaluated by emergency physician or any physician. So then it brings us to the next question. So how is stroke diagnosed? Just like any, most neurological diseases, the first is clinical diagnosis. So, when somebody tells us that I was all right till such and such time, and now suddenly these symptoms started, it could be stroke. I'll give you one scenario. Like, a 65-year-old person has gone for a morning walk. He walked nicely for 5 kilometers and then he comes back. So his wife gives him tea, he's reading a newspaper, and suddenly what happens is, the tea falls off his hand, the newspaper falls off his hand. He tries to, he slumps from his chair, falls on the ground, and is trying to call his wife, but he's not able to verbalize, words are not coming out. So this is a typical scenario where, the right side is paralyzed. So that's why he could not hold the teacup or the newspaper, and speech also is lost because both these are, controlled by left side of brain. So left side of brain has the speech center and the control for right hand and right leg. So this is a typical scenario where stroke can happen, or somebody who leaves for office totally normal, suddenly he finds that he's not able to, hold the steering wheel of his car, and then, the grip is not there. Again, that could mean a stroke, and these are all real life scenarios. I've had patients, who came back and told us these symptoms. So that is, it can't be anything else. If something develops so suddenly and very very localized, it has to be stroke. And then the person comes to the, emergency department, our doctors see, and then we just do a simple CT scan. Our idea is to distinguish the two types of stroke. In one type of stroke, the blood supply gets blocked. That is called ischemia or thrombus or embolism. Other type is where the blood vessel ruptures and blood leaks out. That is called bleeding or hemorrhage. In the very early stage, we cannot see the thrombus or the ischemia. So our aim is to make sure there is no bleeding, because treatment is then thrombolysis. I will talk in the next slide. So simple CT scan can tell us whether brain hemorrhage is there or not. If it is not there, then we start the clot buster therapy. In some cases, we may have a doubt whether it's a stroke or not a stroke, or somebody who comes beyond the initial golden hours. Still, some cases we can select for clot buster therapy. In such cases, MRI may be required, but MRI is not a must. Don't go to feeling that, if some hospital doesn't have MRI, initial treatment should be delayed. No. If you have a center where CT scan is there, MRI center is say 3 or 4 hours away, don't waste your time. Go for that hospital and take the initial clot buster therapy, then move to some bigger hospital. And always we should not forget low sugar. Many times, if sugar is low, say 40 or 50, then a person can get paralyzed. So we should check the blood sugar, very easy to check. And the sugar is low, give them glucose injection, and they become normal also. So not to forget this common condition. So what is the best treatment for stroke? We want always the best treatment. So the best treatment for stroke, which can positively treat stroke, is only one, that is called, technically called, thrombolysis. As the word means, thrombo means clot, lysis means dissolving the clot, and commonly called as clot buster therapy. Now this therapy is time bound. This is where, we keep emphasizing that don't waste even a single minute. Each minute that we delay the treatment, several, million of brain nerves get damaged and they don't come back. So once somebody has crossed 8 years of age, any nerve neuron lost in the brain cannot regenerate. Till the age of 8 years in a child, the brain nerves can regenerate, but not after that. So we have to, avoid any kind of delay. And in that, it's a very simple thing. The injection is given in the vein, in the arm, over 1 hour period. Medicine by name tissue plasminogen activator. It is available all over the country. It is not a new treatment. It was approved in 1995. So 26 years ago, this treatment came. I am surprised, negatively surprised to know that only 10% of patients are able to receive this treatment. It is not costly also. Initially, when it came, it was costing 1 lakh. Today, it is 30,000-40,000 rupees, which is not a major treatment. If you look at the impact, an untreated patient can have. They can lose the job. They're not able to work, and then it takes several months for them to, get better. So we have to always remember this. The moment you suspect stroke, go to the hospital, get diagnosed, and ask for this thrombolytic treatment or the clot buster treatment. Those who have come after 4.5 hours, there, in some cases up to 9 hours, we can have, by a device, by a machine, we can extract or remove the clot. That is called thrombectomy. This requires advanced setup. So those who are in big cities or metros, and even tier 2 cities, many centers have this facility. So, so we have some good treatments in the first 6 to 9 hours. But once we, finish 24 hours and then come, then they are not very good treatments. We have treatment, but not very good treatments. So what are the other treatments, those who come, say, later than that? So of course, you must have all read about blood thinners like aspirin or clopidogrel. Now, these medicines are blood thinners, but they cannot dissolve the clot. The purpose of using these medicines is to prevent second stroke. So, those who get stroke once, they have a higher risk of getting strokes in the future. And by using blood thinners like aspirin or clopidogrel, we can prevent recurrence of stroke. Sometimes the clot forms in the heart and then it travels to the brain. In such cases, we use other kind of blood thinners. They are called as anticoagulants like heparin, warfarin, acetylene, and now we have newer drugs like dabigatran. So the difference between old and new are that in the older anticoagulants we had to use blood tests like PT-INR, which may not be there in many villages or some small centers. So there we can use this newer anticoagulants where the regular periodic blood testing is not required, and also diet does not interfere. So depending on your condition, the doctor will choose what is the best drug. But just basics information I'm giving here. Blood pressure and blood sugar, if they are high, they are the commonest risk factor for causing stroke. In the initial period, these BP sugar may be high, so we have to actively control and bring it to normal. And then, Dr. Anirudh, he will talk more about physiotherapy, but we have to, even on the day one, as early as possible, we have to start physiotherapy, and then only the outcome is good. It's not that, we wait for 7 days, 10 days, and then let the other things, get better, then we start. Not like that. So on the first day itself, we have to start physiotherapy. These patients are paralyzed, so they can't move their legs. So sometimes clots can form in the leg veins, and these clots can travel to lungs also, which can become serious condition. So we have to use medicines or even sometimes compression stockings to prevent clots in the leg veins. And we have to assess swallowing. Many patients can't swallow, and if we give them food by mouth, it can go to lungs, what is called aspiration pneumonia. So every stroke patient, we have to assess swallowing. If they have any difficulty, we can put a tube from nose to stomach, that is called rice tube, for the initial few days, and that prevents any kind of aspiration. Now, what are some of the post-stroke complications? So, if all goes well, these things don't happen. But as a doctor, as a treating team, we always look for these complications. We preempt, suspect, diagnose, and treat so that the disability and any kind of unexpected deaths can be avoided. So, initial first 3 to 4 days, the clots can become bigger in size. So, more parts of brain can get affected. So, this is where correct use of blood thinners and anticoagulants come in, and we have to select the correct dose and the correct amount of medicines. Sometimes the brain clot can cause swelling in the brain. We have medical treatments also. If the swelling is too much, then sometimes we just remove the skull bone so that the swelling does not harm the normal brain. And any disease in the brain can cause fits or seizures. When that happens, we have good medicines to control the fits. Pneumonia, I already mentioned, if patient is not fully conscious or swallowing is not good, the food or water can go to lungs, causing pneumonia. So we have to prevent it. And then if it is there, we have to start antibiotics. We already talked about clotting of blood in the leg veins. We use compression stockings and sometimes passive movements of the leg and the foot to prevent clotting. And bed sores, it should not happen. If patient is lying in the same position, they can get pressure sores or what is called bed sores. So frequent change of patient every 2 hours is done routinely in the hospitals to prevent bed sores. Then later stage, once we discharge the patients, it's not that most patients recover. Many patients do recover, but good number of patients, say 60% or 65%, may have variable amounts of disabilities like motor weakness. So they can't use their hand for normal function, they can't walk properly, they have imbalance when they walk, they can't speak clearly, they can't understand, swallowing problems, memory problem, post-stroke depression. So any disease can bring depression in the patients, especially a disability disease like stroke. In a person who was totally normal, doing everything normally, suddenly he becomes dependent on others for everything, loses the job for some time, can lead to depression. And of course, any patient who has got stroke once can get stroke recurrence, and uh, so that also we have to suspect and prevent. Now, always, prevention is better than treatment. So we should know what causes stroke. And once we know the risk factors of stroke, we can take preventive actions and try to prevent stroke from occurring. So the commonest risk factors are high blood pressure. So, we have to maintain blood pressure to normal. Normal blood pressure is 130/80. And if pressure is high, of course, we have to try first dietary and exercise. So reduce the salt intake and exercise properly, reduce the, if the person is overweight. Blood sugar, diabetes, another risk factor. So we look at what is called as fasting blood sugar should be less than 100. Post after meals, it should be less than 140. Then there is something called as HbA1c, which looks at 3 months average sugar. To cause stroke, it is more than 7. So if it is kept to less than 7%, the risk of stroke is less. High cholesterol is a well-known risk factor. So high LDL cholesterol, high triglycerides, and the good cholesterol is HDL. So if the good cholesterol is low, all these can be a risk factor for stroke. So again, role of diet. So reduce your oil and fatty food intake, exercise properly. Smoking is something, it's very difficult to understand why people smoke. It has got no benefits. So smoking is a risk factor for almost all diseases, whether it's heart attack, cancer, brain stroke, and also it empties the pocket. So this is one thing where people spend money and get the diseases, but still it is common. And so there is no, there's no reason for it to be continued. So if someone is smoking, it is better to stop. There's no other option. Heart disease also is a risk factor for stroke. So someone who has a heart problem like atrial fibrillation, where the heart rhythm is abnormal, there are medicines to control the heart rate. Obesity, we all know about that. Now people are very conscious and aware that the weight should be kept normal. Many people, they realize that they are obese or overweight. They want to do good things. Like when the new year starts on Jan 1st, many people take resolutions that this year I'm going to exercise, this year I'm going to walk and run and go to gym. It starts, it stays for a week or 10 days, then people don't continue. But it's a major problem. So about 20% of stroke patients are obese, and if we reduce that, the risk can be minimized. Sedentary lifestyle is another things. So we have to be active. It doesn't mean that if we go for half an hour gym or exercise, that's enough. So we have to keep moving. Sitting for long time itself is a risk factor for stroke. So sitting in front of computer, sitting in front of TV, and then munching some chips, and and where to walk. We have, many times we have coffee. We sit down and have. We can stand and have coffee also. Many offices now have standing meetings. So there is, and then if a building has 1 or 2 floors, there's no point, taking elevator. If you have to go for 20, 30 floors, it makes sense. But 2 or 3 floors, we should have a habit of climbing it. Then we did not take the car for some shopping which has been done 100, 500 meters away from home. It is better to go walking and then do that. So some small things, but it makes a major impact. Or once you have your meals, just get out and walk for 5 or 10 minutes. It makes a difference. Homocysteine is something which we are aware also, but not fully aware. So just like high cholesterol, high sugar, even homocysteine can be checked in the blood. If it is high, it can be a risk factor for stroke and heart attack. It has to be controlled. There are some risk factors which we have no control on, like older age people can get more strokes. We have no control on the age. Males have a higher risk than females. Again, we have no choice. And those who have family history of stroke, just that these group people should be more aware and more conscious of controlling the other risk factors. So it's, it makes sense. Based on the previous slide, we know that to prevent stroke, we have to keep BP, sugar, and cholesterol in normal limits. Avoid stress and sleep well. Means 7 hours of sleep is recommended for most people. And those who work very hard, possibly they need little extra sleep also. And for most adults, sleeping once at night is enough. But older people above 60, they can take a small nap in the afternoon also. Other people who work till late evenings, say late nights, they also can take one power nap of 20 minutes. But otherwise, once sleeping at night, and night duties should be avoided as much as possible. But doing, once in a while or once a week is fine, but not routinely. One should not do night shift duties. And if someone is overweight or obese, try to achieve ideal body weight. Regular physical activity, exercise should be done. Avoid smoking and alcohol. And then, those who have already suffered stroke, they require, blood thinners like antiplatelets and statins lifelong. So this is my last slide. So as I mentioned, this comment and queries will take after the second talk. So now I hand over to Mr. Arindam Moitra again. So you're mute.
Doctor, thank you for your great presentation because, in fact, you have addressed many points which our stroke survivors have been actually engaging with us and asking. So I will come to them after we had the next talk of Dr. Anirudh. So, Dr. Anirudh, over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Jindal. It was as usual nice to speak to Sudhir sir, and Sir touched upon all the phases of acute phase of stroke, all the different aspects of the acute phase of stroke. So once the acute phase of stroke is over and the life of a person is saved, then the person and his family members come face to face with the reality, that is taking care of the deficits, how to manage the different uh, disabilities or the limitations that has arisen because of stroke. So with a stroke comes different things, like people might have cognitive changes, there might be difficulty in speech and swallowing, there will be weakness of a part or whole of the body, and all these deficits might lead to different complications like aspiration pneumonia, deep venous thrombosis, pressure sores, some of which might be life-threatening. So then comes the role of the rehab team. So I said a rehab team because stroke affects our life in different ways, and a team is required to take care of the different aspects of stroke. The different disabilities that arise because of stroke can be taken care of by a team of people, which includes a physiatrist, a physiotherapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, fellow therapist, psychologist, and obviously a neurologist and a neurosurgeon. So what are the different we will discuss according to the different deficit that we see generally in a case of stroke, and who are the persons who are involved in taking care of those deficits. So if we start from top to bottom, we see a number of, depending upon the part of the brain which has been affected, a number of stroke patients will have cognitive deficits, they will have behavioral changes, and they will have insomnia or other things. So we need the help of a psychologist who will assess the patient, start behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy, work with the patient and the family members to decrease the depression of the patient and the burnout of the family members. Because often it has been seen because that in patients who have chronic diseases, it is the family members or the caregivers of the patient who bear the burnt of the disease more than the patient himself or herself, because a number of times it has been seen that the patient himself or herself are ignorant that they are having some issues. So these cognitive things are taken care of by a psychologist. Then comes our speech and swallow therapist. As sir already told that post-stroke a person might have weakness of the bulbar muscles, which can lead to swallow difficulty, and there can be a global aphasia, motor or sensory aphasia that is taken care of by a speech therapist. So the swallow therapist will assess the patient. They start with assessing the oromotor movements or oromotor functions of our mouth. Then they assess the pharyngeal phase, and obviously the esophageal phase, it's not possible to assess the esophageal phase from outside. So for that we need some investigation like fluoroscopic guided swallow study. So after a proper assessment of the patients and depending upon the part of the swallow which is affected, the swallow therapist will start the swallow therapy, and they might take the help of a ENT surgeon or uh, get an FL done to see what are the deficits that can be worked upon. Good swallow is very important because, as I told, that impaired swallow can lead to aspiration pneumonia and which can be really life-threatening. Proper swallow is required because it helps us in uh, taking a nutritious diet, because as a lot of stroke patients are older patients, they are somehow nutritionally not very good, and add on to this stroke that food intake reduces, so further their nutrition suffers. Then comes the speech therapist. Now when we speak about speech therapist works both on the cognition of the patient, communication skills, and the speech. So the primary role of the speech therapist is to help the patient in establishing a good communication. And we should always remember that speech is different from communication. Communication skills will help the patient in communicating their problems with the attendants and family members. Good communication helps the patient in participating in the physiotherapy and occupational therapy sessions. So obviously patients who have a good communication skill or their speech is good, overall outcome is good. So there are a number of factors which will tell us about the prognosis of stroke. And a good communication or a good speech is one of the positive prognostic indicators of in stroke patients. So here comes the role of a speech therapist. Then we have physiotherapist and occupational therapist. So as stroke can lead to motor weakness of any of the limbs or of the whole of the body, we have physiotherapist and occupational therapist. They will first and what we say is detailed assessment of a patient is done. Manual muscle testing is done to assess the strength of the muscle of the different muscles, and accordingly the physiotherapist will start with either a passive movement, active assisted movement, and then progress on to active resisted movements. We should always remember that none of the functional movements in our body are isolated movements. So whenever we perform a movement, a group of muscles move in different axes together, and then we are able to perform a function. So the focus of the physiotherapist is to try to develop the muscles in such a way that they all can work together and help the patient in performing a particular task or function. Isolated movements, okay, they are necessary. They help, they give us a, they have some psychological benefit for us, but isolated movements are no way helpful for us. So most of the time, our physiotherapists and occupational therapists focus on functional movements, which are always a combination of movements. Apart from this, good balance, truncal balance, and standing balance are required. So most of the patients do recover and they are able to walk, but there are some patients who are not able to walk. So for those patients, we try to make them independent on a wheelchair. We should always remember that independence doesn't mean walking. We have patients, not of only stroke, but spinal cord injury also, who are independent on a wheelchair and they are living a productive and happy life. So if possible, it's always wanted that the patient should be able to walk, but we should always remember that if there is no possibility of a patient to walk, even after trying all the means, people can become independent on a wheelchair. So ADL training, that is activities of daily living training, and independence training on a wheelchair or for independence in daily activities, these training is imparted by the occupational therapist. Apart from these, as I told, that there are a lot of complications that can arise in a patient of stroke, like deep venous thrombosis, like pressure sores, contracture, deformities, and apart from that, recurrent UTI, urinary tract infection, and respiratory tract infection who are bedridden. So the major role of rehab team is not only recovery of the patient, but also to prevent these complications. And if these complications arise, to take care of them with the help of other experts. So I would like to, I am on the stroke survivor group, and I have seen a number of questions regarding a number of things, which practical questions which a number of patients are facing. So I will speak about few of the things that I have noticed on the group, so one by one, so that most of the doubts are cleared and people get a fair idea of what needs to be done. So generally in a case of stroke, we have seen that people develop spasticity in a group of muscles. That can be a spasticity both in the upper limbs and the lower limbs. Now, generally it is seen that in the upper limbs, the spasticity takes the pattern of flexor synergy, that all the flexor group of muscles are spastic. And so generally the patient's hands is held like this. Okay. Similarly, in the lower limbs, the spasticity is more in the extensor group of muscles, and the patients find it difficult to walk by flexion of the proper flexing the hip and the knee muscles. So again, as we spoke, the treatment of spasticity starts with prevention of spasticity. That starts with proper positioning of the patient in the bed. So the patient is positioned in a way so that the flexor muscles of the upper limb and the extensor muscles of the lower limb are stretched regularly, so that the chances of inducing or occurrence of spasticity in this group of muscle is reduced. So proper positioning of the patient in the bed, regular stretching of the muscles, and if required, medications or Botox injections. So these are the things which are required to reduce the amount of spasticity. But we should always remember sometimes spasticity can be helpful. Spasticity is assessed on a Ashworth scale, and we have seen that sometimes a spasticity of grade 1 plus in the lower limbs helps us in stabilizing our joints. Similarly, little spasticity in the flexors of the elbow and the wrist and finger might help us in holding objects. So spasticity needs to be optimized. We need to take help of spasticity wherever possible. But if it is hindering our daily work, if it is leading to some contractures or deformities, we need to take care of it. Then comes a very common problem, that is, people have a tendency to think that the sooner we walk, better it is, because of which a number of patients start walking before they get or gain adequate strength in their extensor group of muscles of the knees. And for all this, and before gaining enough strength in the trunk and the lower limbs, if they start standing and walking, their posture becomes somehow degenerated. We should always remember that once our posture becomes improper, it will take a lot of time, a lot of effort in correcting the posture again. So standing and walking is a good thing, but it should be done with a proper posture. When I speak of proper posture or improper posture rather, we have seen that people with inadequate abdominal flexor strength when they stand, people with weaker hip extensor or weaker knee extensor stand, their spine tends to go into hyperlordosis. So that needs to be prevented. Again, a number of times people who start walking before they gain adequate strength in their hip extensor and knee extensor, their knee extensors or knees go into genu recurvatum or hyperextension. And I have seen this in almost all the videos that have been posted on the stroke survivor group. Each and every person who has posted his or her video, I have seen their hip going into hyperextension, knee hyperextension. For the younger patient, it might not seem to be a big difficulty, but we should always remember that this in the long run can lead to early degenerative changes in the knee that can lead to early knee osteoarthritis and pain. Then there are certain things that are expected will happen in a stroke patient, and we need to live with it. Like a number of people, they are very reluctant to use splints or orthosis. They never understand that developing the habit of using orthosis is going to help us. It's not like an addiction, because often it has been seen that people say that if they start using the splint, that might become an habit. So we should always remember that good habits are always welcome. And if using a splint becomes a habit, that will help us in walking in a normal, good pattern or with a proper gait, that should always be adapted to, and there is no need to abstain from it. Similarly, it has been seen a number of times that people try to use what we say, a bag kind of thing for the shoulder. They are advised by somebody that they need to use a shoulder bag if their arm is going into subluxation, because once our muscles are weak, it's always easier for our joints to subluxate. We should always remember that as we spoke, the upper limbs has a tendency to go into flexor synergy, that is, the arms will be like this. So it's always better to use a Bobach splint where the elbow is kept straight instead of a shoulder bag where our arms are kept in flexion, elbows are kept in flexed position. So as I spoke, that proper positioning is the first and foremost thing that each and every one of us should follow after any kind of stroke or traumatic brain injury. It's same for both the things. So few things to take from this thing. Rehabilitation should be started as early as possible. Rehab is always a teamwork. Patient and their caregivers are the most important part of rehab team, because it is the patient and the family members who will decide upon the goals to be achieved. Obviously, the goals needs to be realistic. They are the primary people who will keep the caregivers are the primary people who will keep the patient motivated. They are the people who will understand what are the different limitations that the patient faces during day-to-day activities, which the team needs to be work upon. And at the end of the day, they are the people who will motivate and educate the society further about importance of rehabilitation post-stroke. Proper positioning is important. Medications needs to be taken. Physiotherapy and occupational therapy should be continued for at least 6 months. First 3 months post-stroke is the golden period where the rate of improvement is maximum. Patients still tend to recover after 3 months, but the rate of improvement reduces. It is said that we won't see any further improvement 1 year after stroke if the patient has received adequate rehabilitation. Speech and swallow recover mostly within 1 year, but there have been cases where patients have recovered till 2 years of age, 2 years of post-stroke. Most of the patients, they are able to swallow properly without any issue. Communication comes in most of the people. Fluency might take some time. Depending upon the part of brain that has been affected, it is seen that people who have a stroke in the middle cerebral artery, their upper limbs are affected more than the lower limbs, and few patients recover all the functions of upper limbs, but majority of them become independent in walking. The distal muscles or the smaller muscles like the muscles of our hand and the muscles of our foot or toes, they are the last to recover, and the recovery in them is the minimum. Okay. And as sir said, definitely all the precautions to prevent further stroke, that will include medications, lifestyle modifications needs to be followed, and people and the family members need to be educated about the importance of post-stroke life, and they need to be told that life after stroke is not finished. It's a new phase of life where people can still lead a prosperous, happy, and productive life. The only thing that is required is a change of mindset and might be some adapting to some new techniques that can help us in living a good life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anirudh. Your talk was quite inspiring, and I believe that you have been addressing many questions which has been coming in the stroke support group. So now we are moving on to the question and answer session. So let me start with few questions which we have been receiving, and take this opportunity having two experts on one panel to answer this. So you have, Dr. Sudhir Kumar, you have said that reaching at the right time, that the golden hour becomes quite critical for stroke recovery. Now in this case, what are the facilities which are available at the grassroots level? For example, how does a patient or his caregiver know that where to go if a patient has had stroke? That is, what is a stroke ready institution?
Okay, let us divide this into two parts. One part where patient has access to good facilities, like we talk about metros and tier two cities, or where there is CT scan available. So the we are looking at this clot buster therapy in the first 4.5 hours. That is our aim in the initial period, and that the only requirement is we should get a brain CT scan done. So if the place where the patient is, if they have a CT scan center, they should just get the CT scan done with the, of course, consent of one of the doctors who could be available. That doctor can be MD doctor also. Now I mentioned that a neurologist should be there, but it is not a must. So there are studies where an MD medicine doctor also can, with the help of neurologist. Today we are using this, this the session also we are doing on Zoom. and we are all sitting in different areas. Our audience is in different cities. So it is easy for us to connect and give guidance to remote places. And same thing, teleconsultation and this telemedicine has taken up in a big way in the last 1 year thanks to COVID. COVID has troubled us, but there are a lot of good things, including this webinar, which happened because of COVID pandemic. Otherwise, we would be looking at some hall where we'll be sitting and a limited number of people can listen. But now we know that through Zoom and through Facebook Live, we can reach anyone anywhere in the world. So same way, we have offered teleconsultation to people who are not able to reach a big center. So, but the basic requirement is one CT scan is required, and we have a time of 4.5 hours. When we say 4.5 hours, it doesn't mean that we have to wait for 4 hours. Those who get the treatment in the first hour, they have a better outcome than those who get at the third hour or the fourth hour. So every minute is important. So go for a hospital, where a CT scanner is available. Then I think the things will move forward faster there. And a neurologist is ideal, but if a neurologist is not there, consult MD medicine doctor also, who with the help of neurologist can give this treatment.
Sir, is there any registry or a database of stroke ready hospitals in India, like which people will always like to go to the best places, which has the best of facilities?
Yes, I think the group of neurologists in India, our body is called Indian Academy of Neurology, which has about 3,000 neurologists. It is surprising to note that for a country like 1.4 billion, there are only 3,000 neurologists, but that's the fact. Due to some reason, people and even doctors feel that neurology is very complicated, very vast. So they take up things like cardiology. We have so many cardiologists, thousands of cardiologists, but people don't come to neurology. But of course, so we have a registry of all the neurologists, and then as a part of this Indian Academy of Neurology, we have a stroke group also, what is called Indian Stroke Association. And Indian Stroke Association has on their website, we have a list of stroke ready hospitals also, and we have primary stroke care, comprehensive stroke care, advanced stroke care. So all this information and database is maintained by them. And then of course few other groups also are there which are making that, but it is not readily available. And but I think there is a need to make it more public and accessible to public, which is not the case in our country at the moment.
So, we understood about stroke ready institutions. What about stroke ready ambulances? Is there a concept of stroke ready ambulances in India?
As of now, we don't have specific ambulances dedicated to strokes, except in few cities. I know that few of my colleagues are doing good work. Cities like Nellore and few places where we have, on their own initiative, they have started this. But in a big way, we don't have dedicated ambulances for stroke. When we look at the West, so what they do is they even have a CT scanner in the ambulance, mobile CT scanner. So when a patient has a stroke, they just call this number, stroke number. Then this paramedics and ambulance reaches the hospital. They assess the patient, do a CT scan then and there, and they also have this, drip, what is called as they start the clot buster drug. As I told you, it takes 60 minutes to, get the medicine going. So the doctor assesses the patient at home, does a CT scan, consults the neurologist, online, starts the clot buster drug, and then he shifts the patient to hospital. Of course, that is ideal. We also need to, get to that. It's not difficult. To get in mobile CT scanners, I think only few centers have. So, but I think there is a need to have more such ambulances where there is CT scan, and then we have paramedics who are well trained to start this, IV intravenous clot buster therapy. That will be one. I think someone should look at that. It's possible to do it. It's not difficult.
Sir, is there a stroke patient registry in India? If one wants to know the quantum of the problem, is there a dedicated patient registry in India on stroke?
The answer is no, but there are some, huge centers which they maintain their own. So it is center wise. We don't have a pan India registry. So if you ask, they will get a Sri Chitra registry from Trivandrum. In Hyderabad, we have NIMS. One of our great stroke neurologists, Dr. Subhash Kaul. So his initiative, they started at NIMS. So like that, I'm sure AIMS also may be having PGI Chandigarh. So institution-based registries are there. So patients who come to that hospital, but we know that many stroke patients don't reach hospital. And I studied from CMC Vellore, it's one of premier institutes in Tamil Nadu. So there, one of the first studies in the field was done. So the group of doctors went to each house and asked, whether somebody developed paralysis. If anyone said yes, they were brought back to hospital and checked. So we need, and then we have many studies which came from Bengal. Also, we have a study. So people have done this kind of prevalence studies to study how common it is, but we don't have a dedicated database for stroke or any other disease. We don't have a centralized or India-based registry for any disease. So we don't know the exact quantum. We have to, get bits and pieces information from various hospitals. And I think at one even state level there is no such data except COVID. I think COVID data is there, on the fingertips of everybody. So this is an example that is possible for a disease like COVID, where we have millions of patients across the world. We are able to know the numbers, hour by hour also. So I think since we have done it for COVID, I think it is possible to do for less common conditions like stroke, or it's less common, but very useful to have data on that. It's possible to do it.
Okay, so thank you. So maybe due to internet connection, Mr. Arindam is.
So yeah, I was facing internet issue, so that's the peril of this internet age also. So my next question was, I've been seeing a lot of questions in our stroke patient group was regarding use of medicines like Ecosprin, which the doctor may have prescribed, and they are always asking whether we need to continue even after a year or even after 6 months. So what are views on that? Should a patient without any consultation should continue or discontinue this kind of medicine?
Okay, now there are two parts to it. Some people want to know who have never suffered a stroke. Can they take aspirin to prevent the first stroke? Many studies have been done, and the answer is no. So somebody who has never suffered a stroke, they don't need to start aspirin to prevent the first stroke, unless there are special situations. If somebody is in that category, they should consult a doctor and then decide. The second part of the question is, if a patient has already suffered a stroke in the past, now he wants to prevent the second stroke. For such a patient, that is called secondary prevention. For that, aspirin or clopidogrel, one of these two medicines, is required lifelong, unless there is a contraindication. Contraindication means if somebody has a bleeding disorder or tendency to bleed, because the risk of using blood thinners is the risk of bleeding. It can be a minor bleeding like gum bleeding while brushing teeth, or while shaving there is a bleeding on the cheek or the face. That is minor bleeding, but sometimes they can have major bleeding like brain hemorrhage, blood vomiting. So if those disorders are there, of course, they should consult a doctor and then take care of this thing. If they are doing well, if there are no side effects, then they need to continue aspirin lifelong. Patients who have suffered a stroke in the past.
Since you are also an expert on Botox therapy, I believe. So, how good is that in with stroke patient as far as stroke patient is concerned?
I think Dr. Anirudh has answered in the chat box. I'll just add to that. So basically, Botox is useful for spasticity. So many times when the stroke patients recover, they have stiffness of the muscles, specific muscle groups, and which does not improve so much with the physiotherapy. For such a patient, there is a role of giving Botox injection along with continuing with the physiotherapy. It's not a substitute. It's not that you give injection and then stop physiotherapy. It's not like that. So it's a complementary thing, and it definitely adds benefit in patients who have what is called post-stroke spasticity. So some muscles become tight in the arms and the legs, and there it is useful. Also, it reduces the pain. Sometimes they have pain also in those stiff muscles. Pain will be reduced. Then sometimes the fingers, they're bent like this. So to cut the nails or nail hygiene is very difficult. And we can't clean that area. So after giving Botox, the patients can open their hand, open the fingers. So maintaining hygiene also becomes better. Some benefits are definitely there, but case selection should be good. So the patient should consult a neurologist, physiatrist, and then under proper guidance they should take it. And it's not that you give it once. Some patients may require second sitting after 3 months. So those things we kept in mind. Question about safety. It is safe. We have a limit on the number of units that we can give. If we give within that limit, it is safe. Only drawback is if we give extra dose, the muscles can get weaker, but that weakness is transient, and after few weeks the weakness improves. Otherwise, no other side effects.
Dr. Anirudh, this is a question related to you. What is the role of and a group like a stroke support group? Does it actually help in post-stroke recovery of a person who has had stroke?
Uh, see, uh, in our country, still people don't know much about recovery or rehabilitation of chronic things. It might be a stroke, it might be a traumatic brain injury, it might be a spinal cord injury. So for patient education, groups like this are very helpful. Second thing,
Okay.
whenever we have a chronic problem, there will be different what we say issues arising from time to time, and sometimes it's not possible for each and every person to visit a doctor or a specialist for small things. So in those cases, groups like stroke support group are very helpful.
Dr. Anirudh, what we have also been observing that it's not only the stroke patients. I think the major issues are also being faced by their caregivers, their family members. So how do you deal with these issues, and what do you want to tell the family members of stroke patient, or what role can they play in this?
As as we spoke, family members and of a stroke patient, they form pillars of the rehab of the stroke patient. So they are the people who bear the maximum burnt of the mood changes or mood swings of the stroke patient. They are the people who have to physically and mentally support a stroke patient. They are the people who have to seek the help of a health services whenever an issue arises. So rather than a stroke patient, a dedicated family people are more suffer more than him or her. So group like these always help the family members in understanding the day-to-day difficulties that they might face with a stroke patient and the various ways to solve them.
Dr. Anirudh, another thing, I have been seeing that in our patient group also, people seem to expect miracles overnight, let me put it, or the process of recovery in one patient, if it is better, it may also act as a demotivator for another stroke patient. So, what is your overall message for people who had a stroke and at different levels of rehabilitation?
See, the outcome of a stroke patient will depend upon two factors. One, the nature of the injury or the stroke, the extent of the injury or the stroke, other comorbidities, okay, and the overall help which they received immediately after the stroke, or how much time left before they started receiving rehabilitation. So definitely when each and every patient has different types of stroke or stroke with different severity, their outcomes will differ. Here the role of the doctor comes into play because the doctor should explain to them what will be the realistic goal, short-term realistic goal, mid-term realistic goal, and a long-term realistic goal for the patient which he or she can achieve, so that the patients and the family members are ready to accept what might be the eventual result even after rehabilitation.
Thank you, Dr. Anirudh. I see that there are many other questions, but as in all sessions, there is a time limit, and every good thing must come to an end. But I will request Dr. Sudhir Kumar and Dr. Anirudh Chinaria, maybe we can have another session which where we focus more on the rehabilitation aspect, maybe with a simple demonstration of different uh, people who are involved in the stroke rehabilitation, the entire team in itself, and also request your stroke patient groups to be part of this movement of stroke support, raising their issues and concern at the national level, creating more awareness. So thank you, Dr. Sudhir Kumar, Dr. Anirudh. It has been a real pleasure to have you this Saturday evening, and for sparing your invaluable time. I know for you people, every minute is very precious. But thanks for sparing your time and being part of this movement. And any other specific question, we will redirect you to from our stroke survivors. Thank you, Dr. Sudhir and Dr. Anirudh. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
so
Vinod.
much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
sir.
Thank you for having this
Thank you,
session.
sir.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
sir.
Dr. Steve Kumar. Thank you, Dr. Anirudh.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all. See you next Saturday on another session on stroke and rehabilitation. Thank you all.